What's a conspiracy with the most evidence to back it up? Story 1. A proliferation of American candy stores selling astronomically priced imports has recently emerged in the United Kingdom. After the lockdown, they appeared out of nowhere. Sales were low, but they were still ubiquitous. Theorizing on TikTok that they were all fronts for money laundering, customers began video themselves at the store making fun of the prices, which consistently enraged the employees. After last year's announcement that an inquiry had been launched by HMRC, the UK's tax department, into the validity of the idea, all of a sudden, they stopped responding. You can see that the shelves are still filled at the one in Leeds Centre near Trinity, but there is a notice of abandonment in the window. The owners just ran away. The TikTok detectives seem to have solved yet another case. Story 2. Taking no-bid contracts to construct expensive shelters for migrants. The same contractor from the DC region is also busing them north. Worldwide, they are also complicit in the trade of human beings. The most blatant real conspiracy is that they are influencing politicians in northern cities and border states to prolong the crisis and ensure a steady flow of funding. Their involvement in so many other projects surprises me less than the fact that they aren't the same contractors who constructed the wall. You can pretty well ensure that they are profiting from any crisis that has been going on for far too long, since the president of the company is a former intelligence operator. Even though it's just speculation to suggest he isn't an active asset, it's also just speculation to suggest he is. Story 3. The grand scheme to persuade naive individuals that conspiracy denotes a crazy person's imagination. Daily, new conspiracies are uncovered. It's not always a bad thing, but there's a worldwide plot by adults to make kids believe in Santa Claus. The word got stolen at some point, and now it instantly brings discredit if anybody says it. When describing covert planning, you have to be careful not to use the word since it's essentially a trap. Story 4. The Bilderberg Circle. They gather annually in the summer, and attendance is carefully recorded. Updated guest lists annually. Top politicians, monarchy, corporate owners, maximum safety, complete absence of protocols. Multiple witnesses have attested to the fact that they were present. What exactly are they discussing then? Do they work together in any way following each meeting? What kind of sway do they actually have? The high level of protection makes it hard to say. However, I'm certain it's insignificant. I mean, why would those factions desire to shape global events to further their own goals? Gatherings like Bilderberg, Davos, and Bohemian Grove don't really come as a shock in today's highly linked and globalized world, especially when they're hosted by influential multinational corporations and the international corporate elite that run them. Conspiracies often portray these events as ritual rites with a sinister undercurrent, where the world's enigmatic rulers make their decisions regarding our destinies. The less interesting, but more plausible, theory is that it's like a fancy version of a dull academic conference held at a hotel or golf course outside of town, but for the wealthy. Most people are just as isolated and ignorant as the rest of us, and the mega rich like to get together annually in air-conditioned rooms to attempt to figure out what the heck is going on with this global system, or, if nothing else, to temporarily feel less stupid and better about themselves. Story 5. That in order to divert attention away from the hundreds of other major issues, including the obvious wealth manipulation, corrupt practices, nepotism, and cronyism, our governments are pitting us against one another. Everyone is so oblivious to what's going on that they band together to fight back, but their plans are going off without a hitch. Every one of us is losing touch with nature, our privacy, and our liberties. We fade into the background as their strength grows. Many people give up their rights without thinking twice, assuming they will eventually regain them. Another global power's attempt at control, or more accurately, the reaction to it, was COVID, which our planet had to cope with. I used to think things happened organically, but now I see how wrong I was. We are lifeless bodies dangling from the ceiling, drained one drop at a time, but this isn't some little glitch. It's a global nuclear catastrophe waiting to happen. If we do nothing, we'll lose all control, and it will be forever lost. Story 6. The official version of events surrounding JFK's murder is flawed. It's not easy to tell which of the prevalent conspiracies is more plausible, and the evidence doesn't support the official story either. The idea that there were two separate gunmen is one that appeals to me. The FBI was aware of this, but they chose to focus on a single shooter theory instead, fearing that they would appear bad if they were to uncover not one, but two plans to kill the president. The hypotheses that groups like the Mafia, the FBI, or the CIA could be involved are reasonable enough, but they are also so clandestine that members of those groups likely thought someone from their own ranks was responsible, no matter what. While Oswald was acting alone, the second shooter may have been affiliated with one of them. Someone associated with one of those parties could have decided to try and take the shot on their own. A great conspiracy would be unnecessary. Still, the evidence doesn't point to a clear winner, and the idea of them collaborating is a little far-fetched. Here we go again with the FBI insisting it was just one gunman and two unidentified men firing simultaneously. Everyone assumed it was their men, even though it was only two randos. Story 7. Rich landowners in Hawaii tried to buy out the locals who lived in areas ravaged by wildfires earlier this year. Almost no damage occurred on rich property. Citizens caused confusion and blocked off areas in an enigmatic way, and landowners pushed individuals to sell their unimproved land for next to nothing as they searched for their deceased relatives amidst the raging fires. As a result of the growing number of reported cases of human trafficking, Hawaii temporarily halted land transactions. The biggest wildfires in Hawaiian history nearly missed the wealthiest landowners, while the tiny landowners who lived next to them were the only ones impacted. It's a little strange to say the least, such as Oprah Winfrey, well-known actors, and billionaires. And that in several instances, they have been attempting to pursue these deals for years with no success. Story 8. Because a correlation does not necessarily indicate a causal relationship, this is still not demonstrated. Many children's intelligence and aggressive tendencies were negatively impacted by the long-term exposure to lead in gasoline. The automotive and gas corporations were aware of the health concerns, but they chose to ignore them. Because of this, crime rates skyrocketed throughout the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. The prohibition of leaded gasoline contributed to a dramatic decline in violent crime that has persisted throughout the 1990s, since generations who did not breathe lead-contaminated air as children grew up to be less aggressive. Almost exactly, the curves coincide, and surge in crack, heroin, and other drug usage, as well as state brutality, racism, and other issues, could have impacted it. Story 9. Walt Disney's preservation in liquid nitrogen sounds as ridiculous as it sounds. Reason being, it's not so much a single piece of overwhelming evidence as it is a jigsaw puzzle. Take into account, cryonics was all the rage when he passed away in late 1966, and the first documented occurrence happened soon after. Disney probably knew about all the cryonics talk. Almost no one heard anything regarding Disney's sickness, and when he passed away, there was just a brief statement. His viewing, or funeral as it was called, was held in strict secrecy. Disney did not die suddenly, despite the rapid progression of his illness. Ample time was available to coordinate with cryonics trailblazer Robert Ettinger, and, obviously, a plethora of cash to cover the costs. The sole piece of tangible proof that Disney was not preserved is his death certificate, which specifies that he was cremated. Unless, of course, bribing the official who approved the certificate might lead to a little deceit. In the end, details on the reason for demise wouldn't alter. Finally, and maybe most importantly, Walt Disney would be the kind to pursue cryonics preservation. Story 10. A homicide in Oregon involving Franca. Murdered outside the Oregon Department of Corrections offices, he oversaw the state's penal system. Many believe that a handful of his assistant directors and their staff were behind his murder, even though a suspect was convicted of the crime. This notion has persisted for decades. All evidence now points to the theory being correct, and the initial conviction has been reversed. It's a wild tale, and there's a good podcast all about it. Story 7. Bread is nothing more than a marketing ploy concocted by those in the bread industry. A never-ending loop it is. They begin making the bread. There are various varieties of it. Banana, raisin, pumpkin, pumpernickel, white, and wheat are all part of it. Bread is bread regardless of variety. After that, we go ahead and purchase the bread. Moreover, we get pleasure in it. We keep going back to get the bread they produce since our appetites grow as we eat. Their plot is becoming increasingly convincing to us. We buy what the companies sell and they bake more bread. Not everyone can see it, but everyone knows. The conspiracy wins out in the end. Story 12, Cointel Pro Gladio, documents found during the raid on Office of Vatican Bank official, FBI assassination of Fred Hampton, MK Ultra, the American government's testing of syphilis on unaware Black Americans, and numerous Cold War diplomacy schemes. That is, Gulf of Tonkin, Iran-Contra, assassinations of world leaders, creation of death squads in South America, etc., have been proven, though many questions remain. Furthermore, the US invasion of Iraq based on the WMD hoax may just as easily have been a conspiracy. Some, like the FBI's role in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and others with less fundamental alternate hypotheses on the assassination of John F. Kennedy, have provided me with sufficient information to remain agnostic. It is concerning that glyphosate, a herbicide that replaced DDT after its ban for being extremely toxic, is present in all of our food and medicine. Unfortunately, the agribusiness lobbies are able to overpower our weak regulatory agencies, so this situation is likely to worsen. Glyphosate has been associated with an increase in autism rates that cannot be accounted for by a rise in the number of diagnoses. Even if glyphosate prohibition were effective, it would only address a surface-level component of the larger issue. Story 13. It is possible that fluoride in water is harmful or unproductive. Countries that do not fluoridate their water, such as many others, for example, Finland, Switzerland, Israel, Japan, and the Netherlands, have seen a corresponding decline in tooth decay rates. A couple of years ago, the recommended level of fluoride in the water was dropped since the evidence for its utility is quite old and is being disputed or destroyed by recent study. Furthermore, fluoride toothpaste and similar products were not considered in the previous way of thinking. Accidents resulting in sickness due to overfluoridation are extremely rare. After accounting for socioeconomic status and geographic location, children whose water supply was fluoridated had a 4-point decline in intelligence, lending credence to the idea that fluoride may be a neurotoxic. The pineal gland absorbs heavy elements. Fluoride may cause it to calcify. Additionally, water fluoridation is a one-size-fits-all method since it gives babies the same amount as adults, a dosage that is likely excessive for them. Story 14, the CIA's role in the underground drug trade is an entertaining one. In the film The French Connection, the protagonists are members of the mafia who have intricate ties to the United States intelligence community and are involved in the drug trade. During and after World War II, the mafia and US intelligence worked together for two main purposes. First, to quell labor unrest and sabotage, and second, to battle communists alongside the surviving fascists and Catholics in Gladio and similar operations across Europe. Dark money, which cannot be tracked, is always useful, and narcotics provide just that for the CIA. Heroin production surged when the United States invaded Afghanistan and continued high as long as US agents and contractors stayed, supplying about 90% of the global drug market. Story 15, John Lang was terminated by the Fresno police. Forgive me if I make a mistake because I haven't read the narrative in a while. The FPD were heavily criticized by journalist John Lang. The police raided low-income neighborhoods and seized vehicles parked in free parking spots, according to his account. Someone was keeping tabs on his home, FBI style, and he eventually became suspicious. Knowing that the cops were going to kill him that night, he posted on Facebook asking if anyone could let him stay in their home for the night. His house caught fire after no one would allow him. The coroner initially stated that he had been stabbed to death, but later withdrew that claim. For some reason, I can't help but think the last part is true. Story 16. Something about the local food and water is what kept the residents of the small town in South Dakota where I grew up. For some reason, every year on Miracle Treat Day, the Dairy Queen has managed to sell more blizzards than any other day of the year. This has led me to believe that they are the ones responsible for this phenomenon, even though our town only has 7,000 residents. Every other Dairy Queen is outsold by a community of 7,000 people. The community also has a large population of persons who all have left leg impairments, among other problems. How on earth does that little hamlet sell 40,000 blizzards in a single day? I'm just relieved I got out of there before it ensnared me. Story 17, Flight 370 of Malaysia Airlines was not a mishap. Its demise was unquestionably accelerated by outside influences. Flight 370's pilot, many passengers, and the flight's route were all the subject of suspicion due to numerous course corrections. Finding the plane is crucial, otherwise, we might never know. Someone I know who is piloting private planes in the region believes the Australian Air Force shot it down around the western coast. They mistook its renegade status and lack of radio response for a potential threat. In my opinion, the Bermuda Triangle is where it will appear. It may have some merit, though, because Australia wasted no time getting involved and spent a lot of money on the search. Story 18, Olympus and the Titanic plot. The presence of photographic evidence lends credence to it. As far as conspiracy theories go, this is one of the few that I actually believe. Those 3 ships, the Britannic, 2 of which were sisters, belonged to White Star Line. In June of 1911, the Olympic was placed into service. In September of 1911, she was involved in a collision with the HMS Hawk, resulting in significant damage to both vessels. White Star Line went bankrupt after the accident because they were held financially responsible for the incident and had to pay for the repairs to both ships, as well as the legal expenditures related to the accident's court battles. Almost 2 months passed while the Olympic was repaired. In the meanwhile, pieces that were supposed to be sent to the still in construction Titanic were diverted to the Olympic. A minor incident occurred on the Olympic just a few weeks after her return to service. A propeller broke off, and the crew once again snacked on parts meant for the Titanic. Story 19, Zootopia was created in part to supplant Splash Mountain's Song of the South characters, according to Disney. As Disney would have it, the public only remembers Splash Mountain and the song Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah from Song of the South, since the studio prefers to ignore the existence of the film. So, they made a film with fox and rabbit characters to take Brer Fox's and Brer Rabbit's places, and then rethemed the whole thing to be Zootopia themed, keeping certain elements, like the name, from Song of the South. It would be more prudent for Disney to retheme a ride to a popular recent film, rather than retain a ride based on an older, slightly racist film that they are attempting to escape from their memory, given that they now enjoy retheming things to their IP. For example, removing Maelstrom and replacing it with a Frozen-themed attraction. Story 20, there will never be a college in the United States that receives the same level of public money as high schools, because doing so would induce a precipitous decline in military recruitment. Everyone I know who enlists for financial aid on their college expenses is a source. Edit. My goodness, I woke up to a plethora of alerts. The question specifically asked about conspiracy theories you believe. Therefore, it's funny to see how some people are so quick to argue against my response. My first silver medal is yours, nice stranger. I had no idea my tiny remark would cause such a stir. Not only does the federal government reap enormous profits from student loans, but this one is intriguing as well. My source says that I just borrowed $70,000 at an interest rate of 6% plus, and that it will be at least 4 years before I begin to pay it back. This amounts to a substantial sum when multiplied by the total number of who do not default on their loans. Story 21, an event concerning Vela. I detected a significant increase in radiation levels over an unidentified island while compiling data from a pair of Geiger counters that I acquired a few years ago. According to Google, those coordinates could point to a clandestine nuclear testing facility shared by South Africa and Israel. Edit. Alright, someone did notice that the sensor I utilized likely couldn't detect anything as subtle as old nuclear radiation. I extracted the data, mapped it in Power BI, and it appears that I detected a broader pattern, perhaps just typical old atmospheric data. I don't think it's good proof, but damn it, it's mine. I initially learned about the Vela incident because the first radiation increase I noticed in the CSV occurred in that general vicinity. If anybody is interested, I've attached the file for your enjoyment. Acceleration, UV, IR, and magnetic data are among its many features. I was attempting to launch an educational satellite project at my community college, and I wanted to know which sensors would gather the greatest data, so I collected it over the course of 24 hours in LEO. Story 22. Every single UFO sighting in history is actually just extraterrestrials from the future doing a time travel safari to study our past selves. Mistakes with their cloaking, caused by both human and mechanical mistake, have made them visible when they should have remained invisible. That's why their existence has been documented time and time again, despite the lack of any actual attacks. A couple of us. People aren't as interested in this era since we document elements of human existence all the time. As is why we don't see as many UFO sightings now, even though almost everyone has a camera. Story 23, if you change the station on iHeartRadio, you'll still have to listen to commercials because they're all scheduled to air at the same time. I've noticed that this happens to me frequently, and they're basically the only ones in my region. Even rival radio stations do this knowingly. There is no secret plot required. To be competitive, it's a good idea to run advertising at the same time as your biggest competition. That way, during your spot break, your listeners can't possibly stay on another station's music. Radio is really not secret. Keep an eye on the competitors and adjust your strategy appropriately. Returning to the initial issue, iHeart is really just Clear Channel, and the majority of their stations adhere to a standard format. As a result, both stations will take breaks at roughly the same times. Everything here has been tried and polished over time and is based on extensive market research, so you can be sure that the ratings will be accurate. Additional stations soon follow. The homogeneity of radio is a bad side effect. Because it's effective, albeit in a everything is mediocre kind of way, they all sound the same. The trend towards uniformity persists because even when one station successfully innovates, others quickly follow suit. Consider how local TV news programs typically cover weather, sports, local news, etc. at the same basic hour. This is only one more example. Original source, years of programmed radio, employed by Clear Channel. Every day, week after week, I played the same stupid classic rock tunes, just in a new sequence. Story 24, surveillance is always on. We weren't sure if the chicken had gone bad because it had been frozen for a month, but my dad was adamant that it was still edible. So I got into an argument with him the other day. Is chicken edible after being frozen for a month, and how long can you freeze chicken before it goes off? Were the relevant queries that appeared even from the first letter when Dad asked Google. In addition, my mom and I have a strategy where we curse at the phone when we have to call a company and are stuck in line. After that, you'll be lower on the to-do list and wait less. Seems a little fishy on the part of the corporation. Story 25, this feels more like an inside plot. For the past 2 years, I've been a healthcare consultant in the United States, and I've come to believe that insurance companies deliberately reject claims in order to profit from their beneficiaries' medical records. When Humana abruptly decided it didn't believe any of my clients' hospital visits were valid, it resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of medical claim denials. Our client is a large and prominent hospital system. Their main point was that my client had to choose between accepting zero compensation or faxing hundreds of medical records. I find it deeply troubling and saddening. What are your options when they have the means to do so?